Hello and welcome to the second prototype video. So this project is built inside of Unity and uses the Inky plugin to help with bringing in the Inky files which contain all the text for this project. The text is the same as the screenplays that are provided, with the only addition being that there are some comments within the Inky file that help provide cues to Unity to allow for stylization of the text and additional elements. So we'll quickly explain what those are in a moment. So when you first start up, you get a screen like this where you can pick either character to play as, either Alan or Ace, or you can exit the application. Alan is typically associated with the blue hues in the game, and Ace is typically going to be associated with green hues, which is why the buttons have different colors and why the title screen of Alan and Ace has this color scheme. So if we just quickly go into one of the characters, we'll be shown something that looks like this. So the design is set up so that there is one large background image that is conveying what location the player is currently in. There is a button in the top right that just returns us to the title screen, which does work. So if we click on it, it brings us back here at any point in the game. Oh, excuse me. And then we have two character sprites. We have our chosen character on the left hand side of the screen, so this is Alan. And then in the right side of the screen we have a non-player character or an NPC who would typically be only present for scenes when there is an NPC there. So in this opening scene, this character would not actually be here, it would be empty, and it would just be Alan. And then finally we have the UI at the bottom of the screen. So this blue box here displays the name of any character that is currently talking. It will also display the name of our playable character that we've chosen. So in this case it will display Alan's name whenever he's having an internal thought, and I'll show what those look like momentarily. And then lastly there's this big banner at the bottom which will contain the body of the text, including descriptive text. So all these designs were done based on research into the visual novel genre. You'll find that the vast majority, if not all, of the visual novel games use some sort of formula that is like this, with the background image, character sprites, and then a text box that displays the name or keeps the name separate from the body of the text, and then some additional area that will contain the body of the text for when a character's talking, thinking, etc. So when you first start, you can either click the left mouse button or the space bar to bring up the first bit of dialogue, or excuse me, the first bit of the story, I should say. So it prints it in a kind of typewriter fashion because the typewriter is quite often associated with the crime genre, crime solving and detectives and such. So it felt like it was a good fit for the project. So this text that appears is the first example we have, where it is formatted to be a red color to indicate that it is a descriptive piece of text, and it has additional font styling done to it as well, with the layout being that it will display the name of the location if we know it, it displays the date, and it displays the time. And then if we click, we can click anywhere and it will continue the screen. Sorry, it will continue the story. So the formatting is slightly different, but it's still descriptive text. And here's the first example of our name appearing in this text box. So because this is a thought for Alan, it says it's Alan who's thinking it. And any internal thoughts by our character that we are playing as will be displayed in a blue color and connected inside a pair of parentheses. This formatting is consistent across both characters, so it does not matter who you play as, the format style stays the same so that players know what the different text means and when it is taking place for when a character is either actually speaking or thinking. And if we go to the next line, this is what it looks like when a character is actually speaking in the context of the game. So it turns white. And here we have our first set of options. So sadly, there is an issue that has not been resolved as a result of exporting the Inky files to a JSON file and then importing that file inside Unity using the Inky plugin. So we do have a couple of options on screen which are interactable buttons, but the functionality does not currently work as intended. So I would ask that you please investigate the Arcweave URL link that I've provided, as that provides a more cohesive example for the functionality aspects of the game, for traveling between places, bringing up new dialogue options, and other additional factors. So if you were to click this investigate button, I'll do it very quickly as an example, nothing seems to happen and we end up in a dead end. What should happen is more buttons appear, which then give us more choices, and then we can go back to that screen that we had just now. But since we can't, I'll just quickly return to title and then come back in. And it's worth noting that you can skip the text that is being displayed. So while the text is writing, if you hit the spacebar or the left mouse button, it will skip to the next line of dialogue or the next line of expositional text. But you will not be able to go back and see what you skipped. So please use this feature wisely and carefully. But we can then move inside. It then brings up info about the new location. So I'm just going to skip through this very quickly. So here we're meeting a new character who we don't know the name of. So this is actually paired to this sprite on the right that we're seeing. So we know that this character is an officer based on the way they dress and the location that we're currently in, which would be inside this building. But we don't know their name until they tell us it. So in this particular bit of text, he explains what his name is, or tells us what his name is. And then when we next see a bit of dialogue from him, this text bubble updates to reflect that this character has given us his name, and we now know who he is. So we keep going, a new character's appeared, but I'll keep skipping. This is an example of a midway option, midway dialogue option. So this character Damon is asking if we've checked out some information that's been sent to us. So we can hit no, and it'll put us in a bit of a loop. And I'll show this more slowly and clearly in just a pure walkthrough or a pure playthrough video. But in this one, we're just going to quickly skip through it. So if we hit yes, we can then continue the story. We keep going. And again, this is another instance where this is more accurately conveyed in the Arcweave URL prototype than it is here. So what is supposed to happen, but sadly does not, is we should only have the option to investigate and talk to a character, which would be this officer character here. The option to move to a new place and to present clues would only appear after we've spoken to this character about a specific topic. So when you click on the talk to option, it would bring up new buttons that give you new topics that you can talk to the character about, such as where you are, some other characters, etc. And once you've gone through one of these particular options, you then get some items. So when you come back here, the present and move to options then become enabled, and you can activate them when you wish. But to progress through the story, we have to move to the new area, and we go outside. So at this point, we are running in parallel to our online cooperative partner, who would be playing as Ace. So both Ace and Alan are in the same scene here. So the text that we're getting is echoed across both screens. So both characters would be seeing that this character Damon is saying the same sentences. And here the cooperative characters are first meeting their respective partners for the first time. Because we're playing as Alan, who is a human, he does not understand what animals are saying. So for us, whenever there's a noise, like this woof sound, we would actually hear some audio that would play, but this has not been implemented due to time constraints, sadly. But we can reach the end of the introduction, and this would then begin the onboarding sequence to train both the players in the gameplay mechanics and teach them how they can work together to solve the cases. And if we just go quickly into Ace's route, so we've got different sprites this time. This time, because we don't know where we are, it just tells us some question marks. And because we don't know who's talking yet, this sprite would not be here, so we don't know who's talking yet, which presents the name as a series of question marks as well. We can keep going, and here we can see that the character is thinking this, and it is styled the same, so that we know very easily as players that this character is thinking this and not speaking it. Investigate sadly does not work, just like in the other example, but we can move to inside and keep going, and I'm just clicking through just to progress through the story. And here's another example. So this character, Hunter, is a German Shepherd who is barking, which would play an audio file as well, but the feature has not been implemented yet. So we can keep going. And then, again, please refer to Arcweave's prototype for more clear representation of this, but we would only have two options: to check the area out, or investigate it, and to talk to the NPC. After we've talked to the NPC and exhausted all the dialogue options, we then would be able to automatically continue the story. But for the purposes of this prototype, we have a button that lets us just carry on straight away, and this is the button that should be used, as the other two buttons do not have correct functionality. So we can keep going. And additional bugs that have been noted are like this one here, where it does not format the text correctly. It should be formatted just as normal. It should not have italicization to it, but it appears that something has gone wrong with exporting the Inky file into a JSON and then bringing that in. The Inky file has been double checked and the queues are correct, so this may not be completed in time, sadly, or fixed in time. And here we're seeing text from the character that is the same as what Alan was seeing, explain, to say hello to each other. So Alan, our cooperative partner, who would be either online or maybe a local area network, would be saying this. And because we're playing as Ace, we understand what Ace is saying, we understand what animals are saying, so we see hello instead of woof. But we would also hear the audio file play, so that we know what part of the story we're both currently in as both players. And then introductions are done, and we begin the onboarding sequence. So that concludes it for this example, and I will quickly as well bring up. Right, so here is a very quick overview of the Inky file. So this will probably be exported into something like a Word or a Notepad document for perusal, since it may not be possible to access an Inky file from your device if you don't have the program installed, and you may not want to install it either. So just to quickly explain the layout, this left half of the screen that I'm highlighting here is where all the text is being imported from the screenplays, depending on which route we're following. And it's been displayed on the right hand side here as a playable example inside of Inky. So you can scroll, if I just reset this, so you can scroll down and you can see that we have button options here to move to somewhere and investigate. These do work, so if we click investigate, we get the options to click on something and it brings up the text, and we can go back and we can look at the other two, or we can go back again and then we can move to the inside, and it skips quite a ways down because of how much text is in this bit. So we're now inside and talking to new characters. And for explaining the formatting quickly, so these lines which have the hashtags are the equivalent of like comments inside the C# scripting language or any other scripting language, and these all contain data for things like the font, color, etc., that are then read inside Unity and passed into the project to provide the data necessary for displaying names, text, etc. in a certain fashion. And as I say, I'll provide this as a different type of file should it be of interest to peruse, since I believe it probably not be possible to read it in its native form. And that concludes this. So I will bring up another quick recording for the Unity project that uses the Arcweave export. Right, so this is the Unity project that uses the Arcweave export. It does possess quite a few bugs, unfortunately, so it may not be included, but if it is included, it'll just have to be included as a project zip file, since it can't be exported for reasons I'll explain in a moment. But in summary, what it looks like is very similar to what you see in the Arcweave playable version in the URL link that I've provided. So it brings up the images and a bit of text to explain what happens if you pick one character, and gives us buttons to choose who we want to play as. So we can go ahead and play as Alan, and it'll bring up the text. It'll bring up all of the text in one go, but it brings up the buttons. And then as we move to new places, it'll bring up new images and the corresponding text for them, as well as the new options. So these function well to an extent. You'll see why I say to an extent in a moment, but we can move inside, and we're now inside, and we can see that in the right hand column it will tell us what characters are currently in this scene. So at the moment we have this officer character, and one of the issues that presents itself here, which may not be easy to spot, is that the text does not fully print out for whatever reason. I believe it might be a bug in the JSON file, but there will not be time, sadly, to fix this before submission. But we can continue, and this is more clear. We can definitely see that the text is not working here. But we see that a new character has arrived in the scene, a character Damon Blackwell, and his icon has appeared with his little portrait. And we can go to the next, and we can see that this is the loop that was present in the previous example. So we can hit no, brings up all the text, we go back, and we can be stuck in this until we hit yes and keep on going. And then this is where more of the bugs become more apparent. So first two options are intended. The last option is not. The last option, I believe, has been mixed in from a template example that was provided with the Arcweave Unity plugin. So as a result, it has caused a lot of bugs, which is why this project may not be included ultimately, but it will be displayed for comparison. So we have our two intended buttons, but if we talk to our character, we're actually stuck in here because the option to go back has been replaced by this option, which doesn't do anything. And what should happen, as is clearer in the URL link, which I would strongly encourage you to please go and check out, is we should hit setting me up. We then have the text appear, and then some global variables are switched to become true so that we know that our character has been given some items and that we can progress. But unfortunately it just displays the global variable here and nothing else. And then the rest of it is sadly also quite badly bugged. And if I just go back very quickly, so back on the main screen, so if I choose to click Ace, the bugs appear immediately here where the text does not all come through correctly. We're missing quite a lot. The images do change though, and we do correctly get updates on the characters in the scene. So we can investigate, and the investigate buttons work. We can click on the buttons to get different text. These buttons would actually be hitboxes within the image that when you hover over them, you'd be given the option to click on it and then it would bring up the text. But in here, it's just buttons for the purposes of the demonstration in this prototype. So if we move to inside, and keep going, right, so now we're in the outside training area and the image is displaying, and we see the new character Hunter has appeared, who's the German Shepherd, and his icon's here. Text is all pretty much missing, but we can keep going. And we have this scroll bar here that lets us scroll up and down. So the UI is a bit friendlier in this one. It doesn't take up the entirety of the screen. But again, because of this issue where it seems to have merged somehow with another project, even though that project's contents have been deleted, we get this additional option that shouldn't be here, and it also causes these other options to have bugs. So if we try and talk to the character, what should happen is we go through all these options and trip some global variables so that we know when we're able to progress to the next part of the story, but the option to progress does not appear as a result of this bug that has occurred from an unexplainable mix-up in the files of the project. And that's pretty much it for this. The project cannot be exported because of the bugs. It won't allow me to build it. So unfortunately, if it is included, I'm afraid it will only be zip files of the project, which is why I do please encourage for you to look at the Arcweave URL link I've provided, since that does correctly display all the mechanics and intended features of the game, right up to the onboarding sequence that would begin introduction to the cooperative aspect of the game and the player's abilities. So thank you for listening, and please check out the other artifacts that I've provided.